We all make mistakes, it's part of being human. But, some mistakes are bigger than others. Some mistakes have consequences that ripple through time. King David, the legendary ruler of Israel, knew this all too well. His story, etched in the pages of the Bible, offers a timeless lesson in moral responsibility and the painful journey of seeking redemption. David, a man after God's own heart, was known for his courage, his leadership, and his deep devotion. He slew the giant Goliath, he united a kingdom, he composed beautiful psalms that still resonate with worshippers today. Yet even David, this giant of faith, stumbled. His fall from grace stands as a stark reminder that none of us are beyond temptation, and even the most righteous among us can falter. David's sin was not a mere lapse in judgment, it was a calculated act of adultery with Bathsheba, the wife of one of his most loyal soldiers. To cover up his transgression, David orchestrated the death of Uriah, Bathsheba's husband, betraying a friend and violating the sanctity of human life. The consequences of his actions were devastating, leaving a trail of pain, guilt, and loss. David's story is not just an ancient tale, it is a reflection of our own human frailty. We may not be kings, but we all hold positions of influence in our own lives. We are parents, friends, colleagues, mentors, and like David, our actions, both good and bad, have far-reaching consequences. The Bible doesn't shy away from the ugliness of David's sin. It lays bare the details, exposing the raw vulnerability of a man who allowed lust and deceit to corrupt his heart. David, who had known the thrill of victory against Goliath, now found himself entangled in a web of his own making. According to the scriptures, adultery was not just a personal transgression, but a grave sin against God, and a violation of the covenant. It was seen as a betrayal of trust, a breach of the sacred bond of marriage, and an act that brought dishonor upon families and communities. David, despite his position of power, was not above the law. What makes David's story so compelling is not his perfection, but his imperfection. It is in his brokenness that we see our own. We see our capacity for self-deception, our willingness to justify wrong actions, and the ease with which we can betray our own values when consumed by desire. David's journey reminds us that sin is not just about outward actions, but about the condition of our hearts. It thrives in the shadows, whispering justifications, and lulling us into a false sense of security until we find ourselves trapped in its grip. For a time, David lived in denial, attempting to bury his sin beneath the surface of his life. But the weight of his actions pressed down on him. He carried the burden of his guilt, the knowledge that he had betrayed not just Bathsheba and Uriah, but God himself. The consequences of his sin began to unfold, fracturing his family and casting a shadow over his reign. Then came the prophet Nathan. Sent by God, Nathan confronted David with his sin. Not with condemnation, but with a story. The story, a parable about a rich man who steals a poor man's only lamb, pierced through David's defenses, exposing the hypocrisy of his actions. "You are that man," Nathan declared. In that moment, David's carefully constructed facade crumbled. He was forced to confront the ugliness of his actions and the depth of his betrayal. The words of the prophet were like a mirror, reflecting the true state of his soul. This encounter with Nathan marks a pivotal moment in David's story. It is the moment when denial gives way to confession, and the path to redemption begins. David's confession is raw, honest, and heart-wrenching. Psalm 51, attributed to him, is a testament to the depth of his repentance. "Have mercy on me, O God," he cries out, "according to your unfailing love. According to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions." David doesn't make excuses for his actions. He doesn't try to minimize his sin. He owns it fully, acknowledging the depth of his wrongdoing and throwing himself upon the mercy of God. He recognizes that true repentance involves not just words, but a transformation of the heart. This willingness to face his mistakes, to acknowledge the pain he had caused, and to seek forgiveness is what sets David apart. It is in his brokenness that we see his true strength, the strength to admit his wrongs, to seek reconciliation with God, and to strive to live a life worthy of the calling he had been given. David's story reminds us that forgiveness is possible, even for the most egregious of sins. God's love, as demonstrated in his willingness to forgive David, is a testament to his infinite grace and mercy. Centuries have passed since David's reign, yet his story still resonates with a startling familiarity. We see echoes of his fall in the headlines that scream of infidelity, corruption, and abuse of power. We see it in the quiet struggles of everyday people battling addiction, grappling with broken promises, or wrestling with the consequences of poor choices. The allure of power, the seduction of temptation, the struggle to resist the desires of our flesh, these are not just ancient struggles. They are the ongoing battles of humanity. We live in a world saturated with images and messages that entice us to indulge our every whim, often at the expense of others. The internet and social media have amplified the potential for moral missteps, creating new avenues for infidelity, deceit, and the exploitation of others. Just as David faced consequences for his actions, so too do we live in a world where actions have repercussions. David's story is not a license to sin, it is a call to accountability. It reminds us that our choices have consequences not just for ourselves but for those around us. It challenges us to examine our own lives, to confront the areas where we have fallen short and to seek forgiveness and restoration. Confronting our mistakes is never easy. It requires humility, honesty, and a willingness to face the pain we have caused. But it is in those moments of vulnerability that true growth occurs. When we allow ourselves to be broken, to acknowledge our need for forgiveness, we open ourselves to the transformative power of grace. David's legacy is not defined by his sin, but by his repentance. He stands as a testament to the possibility of redemption, a reminder that it is never too late to turn back to God, to seek forgiveness, and to strive to live a life of integrity and purpose. His story is a beacon of hope, reminding us that even in our darkest moments, grace can reach us, heal us, and make us whole.